Peyman Pouryekta joins us today from Berlin, Germany. He is a consultant and advisor to tech industry startups, helping them create stronger, more focused teams and leaders. In recent years, Peyman has worked with venture capital firms, directly with startups as a strategic advisor, and has served in C-level positions. In these roles, Peyman coaches his clients how to set strategy, develop world-class products, and evaluate technology needs as they scale their operations. Among his many career achievements, Peyman joined an AI company as one of its first employees and helped grow that company from the ground up as director of engineering. And by the time he exited, that firm had grown to more than 90 employees with offices spanning from London to New York to Berlin. Today, we'll be discussing some common mistakes that startups make as they get going and as they grow, how to be an effective leader, specifically in the technology industry, and share advice to aspiring entrepreneurs and future executives. And with that, I'm honored to welcome Peyman to this program. Welcome.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for the invitation.
Excellent. So let's begin with a broad but very foundational question about leadership. In your view, what makes someone a good or a bad leader, whether in the context of the technology industry or even in a broader sense for entrepreneurs of all kinds?
Yeah. Um, so my background is mainly the startup scene. So everything, what I'm saying around that is mainly based on that. It might be different for the corporate environment, but like a good leader is for me someone who is really um, understanding the people. To be honest, because like you work with a team and you're not the only one who yeah is on the operation level. There are so many other people who contribute to the success of the whole team. Like a lot of people, especially in the future, they had this kind of idea they have to climb up the ladder and become a C-level leader and be a keynote speaker. Other people are saying like you need to be a really good listener. That's all valid. For me personally, I'm a pretty good observer, I would say, because like people can talk a lot and you can listen to a lot of that stuff, but you need to see what is really going on in the company and what is happening to really take the right decision from my point of view. And every person and every industry is very different. So I think there's not just one kind of way of how to be a good leader. And I think everyone can find their own kind of way of how to become a great leader. It's very individual. So that's also why I'm often coaching different kind of people to find their own way.
Do you find that certain backgrounds either predispose people to a better leadership experience in a startup environment?
Um, yeah, sometimes. Like, for example, there are some kind of for example, I'm a refugee, right? And there are some kind of people who migrated to Germany, and they had, especially in their childhood, they had already some kind of struggles, a bit harder to to get all these things done, which is necessary to have a stable environment and stuff like that. And I think, especially in the startup scene, you need to be really resistant, and you need to make sure that, okay, if something is not going well in the beginning, that's fine. I maybe fall, but I stand up and I go on and I try again and again till it works out. So I think this kind of attitude is pretty important if you want to found a business by yourself, because in the beginning, especially in the beginning, it's not directly always a success. You need to work for a few years on it, and it's pretty normal that you fail.
I think it's an important point too about your biography that we want to share with the audience too. You mentioned your early days. Maybe share a little bit with the audience about your story and how you came to be in Germany and how you came into the technology startup space.
Yeah. So I'm born in Iran, but I came to Germany when I was 1 year old, so I'm pretty German, to be honest. And I did everything in my um, early childhood, like in Germany, in a city which is called Essen. It's in west of Germany. And at some point, I decided, okay, I want to study, and I started with electrotechnique, for example. But I realized that's not really the topic which I want to be focused on. So I worked as a media designer, started to then work deeply on Java development, software development, and at that point, I had really um, nice role models. Like I had three bosses more or less, and everyone was a bit more focused on a different topic. Like one was very much focused on software development, the other one was more on the sales area, and the third one was an internal person with high skills on the design level. And I learned from all of that, and I developed myself more or less in the direction of being an all-rounder, but with a very strong technical background. And during that time, like I don't know if it's common in the US, but like I worked full time and studied on the weekend, like on Saturdays, Sundays. um, did my bachelor degree and my master degree. My bachelor degree was in computer science, and the master degree was in management, mainly focused on IT management. And I think this is also something what I realized. Like it was pretty hard in the beginning to realize, okay, you're working the whole day, and then on the weekend you're still going to university to study something, but you get used to it. Like at some point, I did this for 5 years in the end you get used to it, and it works out if you really want it. And at that point for me it was important to do that, and it helped me a lot to have also this kind of practical knowledge from work, and not only just going to the university and only theoretic knowledge.
You've brought up a couple of important points here that I think we should spend a moment on. And to
Hmm.
give a little context to much of our audience, think of us as younger professionals, aspiring entrepreneurs, leaders of the future. That's really who we're thinking about. And there are two really important points in your last two responses. I'm going to start with role models because I do think this is a really important element that often young leaders miss as they are still in the maturing phase and the developing phase. And you learn a little bit from different people. Let's talk first about how critical those role models were to shaping how you lead.
Hmm.
And then, maybe as a second part to that, what they taught you not to do. And if those two have both been big contributors to how you ultimately decided to pursue your career.
Hmm. um, yeah, the role models are pretty important. Especially in my case it was very important for me, because the one main thing which they teach me was lifelong learning. Like you always have to develop further. And that's also what I really believe in this kind of, especially in the technology world, because the world is growing so fast. And while we're talking, somebody's releasing a new version of the software and stuff like this. So it's so fast that you need to be able to develop yourself and be also curious, like to not only understand just your own discipline, to also understand maybe different worlds and see the big picture. And yeah, the different topics which my former bosses um, were busy with, that was super interesting for me to really understand the whole picture of that. And the second part of your question, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, so the second part is you have role models that you want to pattern yourself after, but
Mhm.
inevitably we have people in our lives that have things that rubbed us the wrong way, and maybe we learned how
Oh
to
yeah,
avoid or be better
yeah,
from.
yeah. So that's also pretty important, and I think it's even easier to say what not to do, because it's like most of the time you don't really know exactly what to do, but if you leave the stuff out what you should not do, then you're already on the right path. So one important part was micromanagement, to not do
Mm.
that as a leader. um, uh, I realized that at a specific time where I had to hire some kind of engineers for my own team, and I realized I'm still very much on top of everything, trying to organize everything. But I hired these people so that they can do it, and I can do something else, like some kind of maybe more important or more interesting topics for me. So I think this is one important thing. And the second thing, which was also very important, is that um, yeah, these kind of three former bosses, they created really a nice environment for me to really be able to grow. um, because you can be highly skilled if you're in the right environment. If you're not in the right environment, if the people around you don't believe in you, they don't support you, then you're going nowhere, you know. But if they believe in you, if they support you, if there's a positive energy in the whole atmosphere, then you can, some kind of magic happens then in the end, especially in the team environment, you know. And I saw this pretty often in startups, especially in the early stages where everyone is really excited and new people come in, and this yeah, it attracts even other people sometimes, you know.
Yeah, that's a very, very important part of, I think, lessons learned for any young leader too, is also about you want to create an environment others want to be a part of. And that doesn't happen organically. So I want to take a moment to talk about that as well. As you advise startups about how to create that kind of culture, it's often said that it starts with the leader, which is likely true in the various early
Yeah.
stages. But over time, that leader now picks up other leaders, and now you have a team, and that team has to create a culture. What are some of the things that you have seen work really well in your career in getting the culture right from the earliest stages?
Hmm. You're totally right. It starts with the main leader, like often the founders. And I think one important part in this is to understand that these kind of startups in different phases, right? Like they have growth phases and the team is growing. And one common issue which happens pretty often is that you have new engineers or new kind of people who join the company, and then you have the people who are there already for a few years, and there's some kind of conflict between them, like maybe because you hired someone who has a leadership position, and then the old engineer is asking, why am I not having this position? So you have to always decide and make these kind of decisions. And I think the best way of how to manage these kind of situations is really to have a trustful relationship with the whole team, like to have on a regular basis conversations, like honest conversations to the people, and plan of, or make sure that everyone understands that you're planning a future for all of us and not only for myself so that I can become super rich or something like that. I think that is really important. This kind of, because it brings this kind of team feeling. And what we did also a lot was, like, we had pretty diverse team, like people from different countries, different ages, um, really mixed. And I liked that a lot. And what we implemented, it was more an HR uh, kind of like HR triggered it to do that. But I liked it a lot, because we had so many different kind of nationalities in the company that we decided every week, like on a Friday or on a Thursday, one of these people in the team can order some food for the whole team, and it's usually the national dish or something like that. And then
Hmm.
we had, I don't know, we had Chinese Fridays, we had Portuguese Fridays, American Fridays, you know, and it was really nice, and it brought the team really together. um, I think food in general brings a lot of people together. It's a nice kind of um, somehow it's kind of ceremony, you know, like you guys are coming together, and then you have nice food together, you listen to music, have some beer, have some talks,
Yeah,
sometimes even games,
absolutely.
you know. Yeah, that was pretty important for me. It's in the end like a little family then at some point.
Yeah. And then let's talk a little bit about that specific element of what I have heard referred to, maybe in less healthy environments, is the original team and the new team.
Yeah.
Perhaps the original team was three or four, and maybe they were friends before they started the business. And then you have to start bringing in more skilled talent and people with unique attributes and abilities. And this tends to be a very critical moment in the maturity and the stage of a company, because
Yeah.
if it continues to be viewed as the originals and the newbies, now you've got two teams, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and so you've talked about some of the tactics that you can use to bring those people together. In the best case scenarios, how have you seen, as you bring in new talent, and maybe some of that new talent is not even getting equity in the deal right now? We're talking about just regular employees, to keep them motivated to invest just as much in the dream and the vision as those original maybe two or three who started it perhaps with their own money, and their everything they have is in the deal.
Yeah, it starts already with the recruitment of these people, to be honest. Like, even, like, one thing is, like, even the process of recruiting people and hiring people, to make sure that they meet already the people with whom they will work together, right? So because then you have already this kind of understanding. Okay, what kind of team is that? How do they work? They meet each other, and they can understand of how this kind of culture already um, is implemented right now. And um, most of the people who are joining for the idea or the product which you present to the outside world. And it's sometimes a bit tricky to navigate between these kind of roles. But I think if you prepare everyone, then you don't have usually these kind of conflicts um, with the employees who are already there for quite some time. And then the new employees, how to keep them motivated. In the engineering department, it's often technology driven. Like if you really can um, give them some kind of space so that they can develop themselves further. So I ask them always, like, what do you want to become when you join us? You know, they're like, what is your plan? Like, what exactly do you want to do? And often they have some kind of specific ideas of um, what kind of technology they would like to use. And if you give them the space to say, okay, we using now cutting edge technology, especially with engineers, they're on it. You know, like they are like super happy to not use this kind of standard software, this kind of stuff which you used maybe the last 10 years, and you can use something which is a bit more creative, a bit more new kind of concepts, new kind of frameworks, and uh, make it your own baby a bit, you know, like because like these people who are there for quite some time, I always want to say the whole time the old people, but they're not old, you know. They're just there for quite some time, and um, they they have already this kind of identification with the company and the product, and they
Yeah.
see it already as their baby. But the new people don't have that necessarily, and you need to give them the space to have an own baby for them. Like maybe, for example, if you think in the engineering department, a kind of new, I don't know, mobile app or something like this. Somebody can own that topic and be responsible for that, and be happy with developing that and bringing that further and bring a benefit to the company.
I know in some of your writings and some of your previous podcasts and interviews, you've had a few of the top. I don't know if it's 5 or 6 or more, but I know you've had some of the top mistakes that startups make when they're in the scaling process. Um, Maybe we can share some of those, and if we can take a moment to maybe go one by one through them.
hmm the first one, it come like first comes always people. So people and culture is the first thing. Um, and yeah, I think I said already some
Mhm.
topics there. It's like new and old employees to prepare the team, this trustful relationship between the team. That's a pretty important one. The second one, which comes directly after people, is strategies. So when you set up a business, um, as I said, you have different kind of phases, and in the first phase, you try a lot of different things out. So you don't have really a clear strategy. Your strategy is to find your product market fit, and
Mhm.
um, maybe you're lucky and you find it. And if you have that, then you can grow the company, you hire more people, you maybe get an investment. But then you are in the next phase, and the way of how you work needs to be different from how you started. And most of the people don't do that. Like they try to do it exactly the same way how they started the business, and then it doesn't work out. Then it gets a bit chaotic. So this kind of thinking of strategy on a regular base is super important on the startup business because it's changing also so fast, and you need to adapt. You need to be flexible to make sure that you're on the right path for the long-term vision. The third one is yeah, structures and processes. I call it always like maybe they have already kind of structures and processes in place. Sometimes they have too much of that in place, to be honest. But most of the case, it's like they don't have it. And in the beginning, when you're 5 people, when you're 10 people, you don't need much of structure and processes. But when you are 50 people, then you need to think about, okay, how can we organize the teams, separate them, and stuff like that, and how can we make sure that the communication is working well. So there you need to definitely spend a bit more time and be busy with that topic. Um, yeah, the another one important thing which I always see somehow, most of the startups I'm working with, they work in the product area, like they develop a software as a service product or something like that. And a lot of startups start to do customizations, which is really not clever to do. Like I can understand why a lot of people do that, because yeah, like you try to make deals, make make sure that there's enough revenue coming in so that you can pay the bills and pay all the employees and stuff like this. But customizations are very problematic, because you start to create different products, and then you realize at some point you have 5 6 different products, and it's not aligned with the main vision and idea of what you wanted to do in the beginning. And the maintenance of that is very expensive. Like short-term customizations make sense to make the deal and um, have some revenue, but on the long term, it's pretty awful. Like it's always too expensive, and you have to um, yeah, stop doing that at some point. And I think the last one, which I always mention, is the tactical debt. Um, yeah, one reason is because like in the beginning you do stuff sometimes quick and dirty, like you just need to deliver, make sure that the customer has a solution and it works, but it's maybe not like the software is maybe not prepared for future scale, or that other people can easily understand what you developed and stuff like that. It's and you need to take care of technical debt on a regular base. It's a bit like I explain it always like that, that imagine you don't clean up your apartment for 3 months, right? Like it will be a mess to clean it up then, but if you do it on a regular base, like every weekend, it's not much work. And it in the end it's much better like that. So that is, I think, the trick on that. Not every not every company manages that in the beginning, but at some point you have to, because the otherwise it's just too expensive. You in the worst case you have to throw the solution away and build it from scratch.
So there's a couple of these that I think are particularly interesting, and I'd love to get your sense of how you've seen different leaders deal with these problems. So
Hmm.
one of them, and I couldn't agree more about the customization. It's so tempting when you have a customer on the hook, and if you just make a few modifications, you're going to get that deal signed, and like you said, it gets you through the next funding cycle, or it gets you through the next couple of months. Maybe it gets you through a quarter. Um, how have you seen leaders navigate that where they can still get the deal done? They can
Yeah,
still meet the client expectations, but they haven't fallen into the trap.
yeah. um like one thing I always try to do is, you need to create the software, the product, in a way that you can do customizations, but you do it outside of the product. For example, you create APIs, like interfaces, so that a third party could do this kind of customization for you. Okay, so that the system is flexible enough, but it's not part of the core um, product. So that is one way, and I try to always do it in that way, because you have enough flexibility then. Some other um, uh, yeah, some other startups on the leadership, they really decided to do the customization, and then make sure that the customer understands, okay, that would work for 1 year, but after that it is not available anymore. um, because like often it is also possible, like if you have a deal with the customer and it's a new customer and they're happy with your work, then it's much easier to explain that in a later stage, um, that there are some changes on the platform. Maybe they find a different kind of way of how to do that. um, but most of the time, like I tell them, if it's like kind of customization which is not just 1 or 2 buttons more or something like this, if it's really like a bigger thing, then it's really not your customer. It's the wrong customer. Like, you're not building that for this company. You're building this for someone else. Um, and I think to say no is also pretty important sometimes.
A fine point, and that's something you have to learn throughout your leadership career, saying no to all kinds of things that might sound interesting at the moment, but are setting you up for trouble down the road.
Yeah, so true.
So then the other part of this on structure and process, I think we see extremes. There are certainly a lot of founders and leaders who are structureless, let's say, perhaps to
Hmm.
their own detriment, and then others who are such extraordinary project managers that they truly get down to the minutia of every detail, and it actually constrains the creativity of a team. How do you advise your startup teams and the folks that you consult to find the balance.
Yeah.
And at what point is it an appropriate balance? I think there's a big difference between 5 people and 50. I think we
Hmm.
understand that, but there's also the difference between hardly any written procedures and then having a manual that's 300 pages thick.
Yeah. That's a really good question, and it's tricky. But most, like, what I always recommend is like to have this view of you deliver something for the customer. Like, you need to make sure that the customer is satisfied with what you deliver and their problem is solved. If you start to be busy with yourself internally, like with too many structures, too many processes, then something is wrong. Like, you need to be really have this kind of customer view and understand, okay, what can I do, which kind of smaller processes can I implement, so that the whole kind of um, development, for example, improves. And I try to do it step by step. Usually it's the case that there's no structure. It's rare that they have too much, to be honest. Like, usually it's like there's nothing, and then you need to implement things step by step. I do often a workshop with the whole team so that everybody understands and is um, on the same track. And I let often also the team members decide or come up with ideas of what they want to do and if that makes sense. Um, so what I always do is like I make some kind of technical strategy day, organize that, and then I let everyone present. I tell them always, what would you do if you would be the CTO? And then they have presentations, they come up with some kind of topics. And then we discuss this, we do some votings about it. And in that way, I can identify what the team thinks is important. I match this with what I think is important. And in that way, I do, like I implement step by step, smaller steps, different kind of um, processes like recurring meetings, maybe Scrum processes, Kanban processes, things like that, um, and make sure that it works. Um, I didn't have good experience with changing to change something drastically, like directly for everyone. Like, what worked well for me is to identify, for example, it's years ago, but we had one team and they wanted to implement Scrum processes in the company, in the whole company, and I chose specific people who were really interested in that topic, who wanted to really try that out because they had all the motivation for that. And I created a new team with them. I let them work in that way, and it was super successful. And after the first sprint, like after the first 2 weeks, they had the first results, and everyone else in the team saw that and they became jealous. They were like, I also want to work like that. Like, it seems to be much better, everyone is happy in this team. And then it has this kind of effect. Um, yeah, in that way it worked out, and I think after 6 months the whole product and technology department was using that method.
Yeah, jealousy and admiration can be powerful motivating tools.
Yeah, it was not planned to be honest like that, but I thought if we create one team and try it out as a kind of test to make sure that um, the team believes that it works and understands that it works, and also that the management understands it, because the management was also not 100% sure if it's the right way and you need to prove it somehow. So that was the reason why I did it like that.
Let's talk a little bit about ego. It is a
Yeah.
natural trait of many entrepreneurs. In fact, one could argue it's hard to make a big entrepreneurial leap without a healthy ego and confidence in oneself. But the very same confidence that leads you to take the step to realize your dream can also trip you up along the way. Tell us a little bit about how you think about this topic of using ego properly as a leader,
Mhm.
and how you coach entrepreneurs, founders, and executive teams to get the best out of that without allowing it to become a problem for the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. I think it's normal. Like everyone has an ego, and it's good to have it. It depends on how how much you express that and how much you control it. Also, it has a lot to do with your emotions, and um, it can help in specific situations, but it helps mainly, I think, when you really are aware of your ego. And most of the uh, people which I met, and even I had some time where I was not really aware of why I'm taking this decision right now, and then I realized, okay, it's my ego. It's mainly about me. It doesn't have much to do with the company anymore. And it happens. I give you an example. So I was a senior software engineer, the company where I became a director of engineering at some point, and I developed an AI engine. It was 2015, and it was my little baby in the end, and I was pretty proud of it. And at some point, like after a year, we realized, okay, I have now 15 different kind of engineers which I need to manage. I can't do the coding anymore, so I need to hand over this to someone. um, and yeah, we hired people. It was clear for me that I will not take care of that anymore, but then I realized at some point I'm still working on that, like, and I realized it's about me, like I can't give it away. um, and if you have this kind of awareness, that's the first step. Like, you need to make yourself somehow aware. I i tell i tell the people who I'm coaching often to listen to your belly. Like, sometimes when you're in situations, your brain maybe doesn't understand it yet, but you have this kind of feeling inside of your body, definitely. And if you can identify that, then you can step by step work on that and make sure that yeah, it's not in the way of your success and the success of the company.
Do you find that that is, I don't know if easier is the best way to say it, but do you find that is easier to do when people are younger and they're starting their companies for the first time? Or do you actually find that that self awareness comes with age and time and it's easier to coach that into somebody who might be founding their company in their 30s and 40s? Does age play a factor?
I think it played a factor, and I think it's easier when the people are younger. I mean, I had different situations, like I had also people who were younger where it didn't work so well, and it was hard for them to yeah, have that under control. I think it's not easy to say that, to be honest. Like, because I had situations where it was like that, and I had also people who were like 50, 55 years old who didn't have their ego in control at all. Like,
Hmm.
um, I think it has something to do with how much you can reflect about yourself. Like, maybe age is not really a good identifier, or not a good parameter to say anything about that. I think it has a lot to do with how much you can reflect about how you're acting, what you're doing. It might be the case that some people um, have this experience when they are a bit older. Um, but I saw also people like pretty young, like in the middle of 20s, who were pretty aware of that. Yeah.
When you think about we'll call this the dark side of startups, or at least the more challenging topics, right? So you certainly hope that you've built a great team. You hope you've built a great product. You hope you have great clients.
Hmm.
Let's start first with when the strategy has sort of gone sideways. And now, as you said, maybe you've fallen into the trap. instead of one core product, you now have created 6 custom products.
Mhm.
And you have to really step back and really look at what you've built and potentially literally take a step backwards from where you thought you were. What does that process look like? And how do you advise your clients to take stock of where they are and when they fundamentally need to reevaluate the strategy and direction of their company because it's just gone too far down the road?
Yeah. If you have that situation, most of the time it's on the management level that something went wrong. It's usually not like a single person in the team or something like this. It's usually something what on the strategy level went wrong, that they didn't understand a specific field of product development, for example. And um, what I always do is like to make this visible, like what went wrong or what is missing. And most of the time is that it is not part of the, like they don't have a real strategy. Like they this kind of restaurants where they sell sushi, Indian food, burger, and pizza. Nothing of that tastes well, to be honest, right? But if you are focused on only one thing, if you understand, okay, in that area where the restaurant is, everyone loves burgers, so let's make burgers and be successful with that. Um, then that's perfect. But most of the management team is still trying to do what they did in the beginning and try everything out and try uh, close every deal more or less. And um, I think the most important part is really to reflect on the management level, make sure that they understand what went wrong and what maybe we need to stop doing also now. Like if there's a like a customization, which is more or less like a known kind of product now, we need to figure out how to move that um, into the uh, main idea of the vision of the product again, or to really say, okay, this is not our customer, we can't do that in, I don't know, 1 year or something like this. This kind of solution has to um, be gone, and we need to explain this somehow to the customer. It's hard, but it's important because otherwise you're covering a lot of resources with stuff which doesn't bring you forward.
Is there a certain time period that you give an idea? No matter how good it may be, no matter how fun that it may be, do you, as somebody who advises startups, let's say that they're 6 months in, they haven't found a customer yet. Maybe they're 9 months in, they have some interest, but they haven't been able to close deals. At
Mhm.
what point does an idea start to demonstrate that it's just the market is not there and you need to move on to the next idea?
Um, it depends on what kind of customers you have. Like if your customer is really like only big corporates, then the whole process takes longer time. So 3 months is maybe too short, but after 6 months, to be honest, you need to have already something because, like, I mean, you in the best case you have a pre-seed round or something like this, but you're mainly spending money, and if nothing comes in, you need to pivot. Like you need to figure out what exactly is your product market fit. And I think if you didn't manage, if you have really salesperson, or if you are mainly the salesperson and you're going out every day talking to customers, and you can't close a deal within the first 3 to 4 months, then it's already tricky from my point of view, because you need at least some kind of traction, some kind of feedback, some maybe a pilot. It doesn't need necessarily to be always um, like to get exactly this kind of pricing which you want in a year or something like that, but you need to have some kind of pilot project, some money coming in, some kind of traction, so that you can learn from that and bring that forward. And the good thing is when you have the first customer, um, then you have also something to talk about, and the next customer might be interested in what happened before and how you solved problems with maybe a competitors or something like that.
And then we talk about the people aspect. So you talked a lot about getting the team culture right, getting the environment right, but inevitably there's going to be somebody that doesn't fit the team, doesn't fit the culture, underperforms the expectations. I think there's always a conversation among entrepreneurs about those that can be coached back into what you need them to be, and then when it is a situation that you just need to separate, a
Yeah.
formal termination. What are some of the factors that you look for in making that decision between coaching somebody up to the standard that you need versus splitting ties and moving on?
Yeah. Um, so I had often this situation, for example, as the company is in different phases, the startup is in different phases. Um, an early employee, for example, was a perfect fit in the beginning, and it worked very much, like very well, and everyone was happy. But then I see sometimes people that they start to stuck in their own role, like they don't anymore know exactly what they're doing in the company, like what they're responsible for. Because in the beginning they did everything at the same time, and now maybe it got a bit more structured, and they are responsible only for one thing, but it doesn't make them happy anymore. So what I look always is, like, I talk to the people several times to figure out really, does he or she has an idea of what they will what they like to become, like do they have a kind of idea of how they want to develop further. If they don't have an idea, maybe I have a good idea because I see something in them. And if that is the case, then I give them really the space to figure that out. But if it's a person who really doesn't have any motivation, and is even destructive to the company or something like that, then it's really time to divide, more or less, like to say, okay, it doesn't work, because nobody will be happy. Like the company will not be happy. I will not be happy. Even that person who is working there is not happy about that. So that's usually how I do that.
Yeah, and it can be contagious. If a person is
Yeah.
unmotivated and they're just kind of hanging around, that can rub off on others as well. When you think about what you're seeing in this generation of leaders, I'm always interested in people who have done this work for a while and been around the technology space. If you're seeing different trends and traits in the type of entrepreneurs that you've been coaching or some of the ideas that you have been seeing, do you feel like the current generation, we'll call it the youngest of the generations of entrepreneurs, that a lot of what you're talking about here is resonating more with them? Are they more receptive? Are they more open? Are they looking for this sort of guidance? Or is it the opposite? Is it a generation, as we so often are told, that is too self assured and not as open to feedback and guidance?
I have the feeling a lot of, I mean, if you have the trust of the people, then they're open for guidance. But to get the trust is maybe a bit tricky, because a lot of, like, the younger generation, I see them often, like, they look for their spot, they look for something what fulfills them mainly. And often they even don't know what it is. Like, even I sometimes don't know what it is, like, I know what, because, like, it's not so crystal clear, and it changes from time to time. And I think in general, it's definitely it's definitely a bit different from maybe my generation, because, like, in my generation, for me, it was important to really have a job, to understand, to learn, and stuff like that. I think for the current one, it's also like that, but they have something on top on that. Like, they really want to change the world a bit, like, they really want to have an influence. And um, I like that because I think it's important. And I think the leadership style needs also to change in that direction. I think it changed already a bit in that direction. Like, all these topics we were discussing, especially about the culture and stuff like that. Uh, like, when I started to work, there was no kind of big incentives in a startup culture, like Thirsty Thursdays or something like this, or lunch or something like this. There was no sponsoring on anything. Like, you do your work and then you go home mainly, and that changes a lot from my experience. And I think it's a good thing, to be honest.
When you think about the artificial intelligence space in particular, I feel like this gets thrown around an awful lot as the end all be all of where technology is going next. Every startup needs to have an element of this. It is the wave of the future. If you're not talking about it, you're behind. I'd love to hear your thoughts as somebody who's worked in this space for years, long before it was necessarily in the mainstream of media and our consciousness. How do you think about the modern innovations of AI and some of the applications that we're starting to see, and where some of those opportunities are for entrepreneurs to get in and contribute to this space?
Yeah. Um, I think it will be really a big change for the whole industry. Like it started already from my point of view. And right now it's mainly like a tool, like I don't believe that it will replace um, someone's job fully. Maybe some of the jobs, like jobs which are, let's say, not too complicated. Um, but I think I see it as a tool, like for example, if you take a look at ChatGPT and stuff like that, it's mainly right now question answering thing, right? They opened it up a bit with plugins, so you can now connect it to an online shop and also order things, for example. But this kind of executional level of the AI is not really there. Like it doesn't have access to an operation system to really yeah, develop software or something like this. You can ask him, uh, ask the soft, ask the chat GPT to how to do it, how to create a mobile app, and it will give you a solution. It will mainly explain it, but to really create something, um, it, it needs some kind of further step. I'm not saying that it will not happen. I'm pretty sure it will happen, and I think it will happen soon. Um, and yeah, I'm really excited about it, to be honest. Like I think it will be a big change, and I think it will have influence in every industry. But I also think it's a good thing. It's just like change can be hard for people, like if you're open for that, and you see how it can benefit yourself and people around you, then it's definitely worth it to go in that direction. Yeah.
One element of it we talked about on this program in recent weeks was, if you think about what artificial intelligence is in its current form, and it's going to obviously get better over time, and then we think about that in the context of ourselves, the intelligence that we gather over the course of a lifetime. One of the elements that makes human intelligence so unique, in addition to our creativity, is our lived experiences and the emotions that we layer on top of that, and all of that has an implication as to how we express our intellect. I'm curious, when you think about the technology behind AI, the fact that it doesn't necessarily have those human features, like it doesn't have a memory the way that we do, at least not currently. Its
Hmm.
emotions would be emotions, I suppose, of an artificial sort. How do you see those as either limitations to the technology for the future to be more human like, or advantages that by not having those so human elements actually gives some of the intelligence more credibility or more of a dispassionate analytical quality that we could benefit from?
Hmm. I think like nearly all of that can be simulated, even emotions. It will not be real emotions, but I believe that you can create systems which have similar simulated emotions like humans have. If it's face expression, um, or yeah, somebody's crying or something like this, especially in the VR world, I think this kind of stuff will be definitely possible. Um, and I think what is so unique, and which still always be there, is these kind of things which cannot be replaced by um, something artificial. It's it's something like, imagine you organize a dinner and you're the host, you know like um, this kind of service, this kind of effort which you put in, this is nothing what an engine can do. From my perspective, I think it can do a lot. And I think it's still a few years away from us to be really on that kind of level. But I think this kind of things which only humans can do, which is maybe a bit more event based. It's hard to explain that somehow for me, but like even right now, when we have this video call, um, imagine we would meet each other in person. It will be different when you can't do that with a computer or with a system, right? Like these kind of things will always be there and much more important for us than before. Like I see that even for myself when I go now out and meet someone in person instead of being in front of the computer, especially in this kind of COVID time. Everybody loves that. Everybody wants that because we're humans. We need to go out. We are kind of how do you call that? Like we're kind of animals who want to live in a group, right? Like we need this kind of interaction between people, and I think this is nothing what an system can um, simulate in that kind of way. Maybe in a kind of virtual way, in a VR or something like this, but you will always feel that okay, that's not 100% true.
Hmm. We're coming to the end of the time. I have two last questions for you. I've tried to save the best for last. One, and it dovetails off of what you just talked about. There's a big conversation in management circles at larger companies about the merits of in office versus remote work.
Yeah.
I think this is particularly important when we're talking about startups. And so much of what you've talked about today is creating an environment and a team culture. Tell me a little bit about your perspective about
Mhm.
the balance between a remote environment where a team may be distributed around the world and by necessity has to have more interactions like we're having today versus those startups that actually can get their 10, 20, however many people physically together multiple times a week. What are the advantages or disadvantages, and how do you feel about this? Where do you come down on the work from home versus work together debate?
Yeah. Um, I personally I like to be really in the office and meet the people in person. Like I tell everyone let's go in the office, Like I like sometimes hybrid models to say okay, maybe on a Friday or something like this it's fine. If not everyone is in the company. But I think it's pretty important for the environment and for the team culture to be together and have events together and sometimes sit next to each other and work on a specific problem together and not only on a remote or virtual kind of way. It works. I saw also some kind of, for example, open source projects are often organized like that, like they're fully remote, for example. I see startups who are fully remote and it works, but it brings always this kind of distance to the people. And it's really hard to manage these teams then also. I think it can work when everyone in the team really believes fully and their motivation is the product and the technology or the topic which they're working on together. I know for myself, for example, I had some kind of jobs and the product or the vision of the company was not so interesting to me. What interesting was to me was I wanted to work with these people. Like
Mhm.
if it's people related for you, then it makes much more sense to be there in the office. And in that way, I think people can also learn from each other better things, and um, it's for me it's much easier. I think this is something, for example, what yeah, this is something what makes us human also somehow, right? Like we want to sit together, we want to hang out. Um, yeah, I like that much better than fully remote. Hybrid is okay for me, but I think especially when you have a nice office and somebody took care of having a nice office, you should use it.
And my last question for you is a forward-looking question. You have a unique vantage point because of all of the different startups that you get to advise and the different network that you have exposure to. What is really exciting to you that's on the horizon? We talked a little bit about AI and some of the applications there, but what are some of those exciting next generation projects that are maybe too small for prime time, but they sound like they could really be something that maybe folks who are listening to this podcast should keep their ears up for and maybe listen for in the coming months and years?
hmm The AI topic definitely. What I'm currently interested in is also a lot of quantum computer stuff. I'm looking into that topic because I think it will also have a huge influence on the whole technology area. Um, I think these are the two biggest one. Sometimes I have a look also on blockchain technology, NFTs and stuff like this. But I think it needs much more development before yeah, it can uh, be more successful than it is right now.
And when you think about quantum computing, what practical application of that is really exciting to you, where it could really help us to do things that we've not been able to do before?
I mean, right now I'm looking mainly at the security topic on that, so encryption. Um, and I think it has just so much more capabilities on um, doing calculations, especially also for the AI world, like the learning and the execution of models and stuff like this will improve drastically if you have this kind of technology. Um, but it's still like it's for me it's still like on a very experimental level. Like you can do a lot of things already with that, but it's not on the level where I would say um, it's yeah, you can use it on a kind of tool or something like that.
It has been a fascinating discussion. I thank you for being generous with your time today. If anybody in our audience would like to learn a little bit more about you, I know you have a website and a LinkedIn. Is that the best way for folks to get in touch with you?
Yeah, that's the best.
And I know your
Perfect. Thank you.
website is www.pouryekta.com. We'll have that listed as part of this episode. We will share that on our website and our social media channels as well. Thank you so much for joining us today and for spending some time with our audience.
Thank you for having me, Brian. It was awesome to speak to you.
For anybody out there who is considering starting their own company or is in the midst of starting their own company, I strongly recommend that you, like I already have, listen back to that episode. There were a lot of key insights there that I don't know that you're going to pick up on the first time listening. So, strongly recommend that you download that episode, listen to it again, share it with your business partners if you have them, and as I like to do with these programs, think on it for a little while, study it, consider your own perspectives, consider how many of those comments today apply to your business. And if you have questions or if you have follow ups that you would like to share with me or our audience, I certainly encourage you to engage us. You can email me info at brianjmatos.com. You can also find us on Twitter at brianjmatos or Facebook brian.matos. I'm also reachable on Instagram, brianjmatos. And clips of this program and all of our episodes will be available on YouTube. You can find me by simply searching Brian J. Matos Podcast or find my YouTube channel and subscribe. That's at Brian J. Matos Podcast. I want to give you a preview of a couple of exciting episodes coming up on the podcast. Next week, we'll be joined by Nick Denning from Wimbledon in the United Kingdom. The topic will be cybersecurity. It is a big, complex topic. We're going to spend about an hour talking with Nick about all layers of getting your business prepared for the cybersecurity threats of the 21st century. And there's a lot of nuances in both protecting your business and responding after what feels like the inevitable when your business becomes the target of cyber criminals. And we're going to talk about some of the trends that have emerged in recent years, even recent decades, and how to better prepare your business for those. And then in 2 weeks, we have Glenn Somerville. He'll be joining us from Canada, where we will have a discussion about leadership, about generational leadership, and about the transition in our, not just our individual workplaces, but in our entire global society from the previous generation of leaders to a new, younger generation of leaders, and all of the different elements of preparing yourself to take on leadership, but also what it's going to mean as a new generation with new values and new interests takes on some of the most important roles in our society, governments, companies, startups, nonprofits, you name it. So, Nick Denning and Glenn Somerville, just a couple of the guests that we have in the weeks to come as we continue on our mission to interview the smartest minds about the most important topics of our time and to ask the very best questions of them that we can. Thank you for joining me again this week, and as always, stay curious.